What's up, guys? Coach Jared here. Welcome to I believe this is episode 4 of the Richmond Elite Podcast. Today we got my man Nick Trout coming on the pod. He's our first kind of guest that we have outside of the gym, so this is pretty cool. Nick's got a lot of stuff going on, and we just kind of want to go through that, introduce him, let him tell you guys what he's got going on, and then it's kind of cool when me and Nick talk because we talk philosophy a lot. Training philosophy, business philosophy, life a little bit. So this is kind of a exciting episode for me. So anyways, I'll let kind of Nick introduce himself and go from there.
Yeah, like you said, Nick Trout, originally from California, high school and some junior college out there, played football. And then I moved up to Duluth, Minnesota to go to college. Got my undergraduate there in exercise science and rehab. Played football up there, Division II, won a couple national championships.
What school is that?
Duluth, Minnesota.
The school is Duluth?
Yeah.
Okay.
University of Minnesota, Duluth. Yeah. From there, or while I was there, realized I wanted to coach football. Really found a passion, coaching young men, especially being, it was the first time I was away from home, and so seeing the role that coaches had on young men, first time away from home, and just all the different things that, comes with that and being away from support structures.
Yep.
So as I was finishing up my last semester there, doing an internship as a GA there with the football team, found an opportunity at St. Ambrose here in the Quad Cities to coach football as a graduate assistant and get my master's. So I moved down here the spring of 11, summer of 2011.
That was a long time ago. I didn't realize you've been here that long.
Yeah. Met my now wife in that grad program. She was the strength and conditioning coach for the track and field program.
Okay.
At St. Ambrose. Met there, graduated. We both got our masters in organizational leadership. So leading businesses or groups of people through change.
Okay.
Just how to develop and manage a business. And then, we started dating not long after grad school. I got a job in the corporate world for 10 years and started paying back student loans. We started a family. We've got 4 kids. Aaron, who's been here, and Reese is trained. He's 14 now. He's a freshman.
He's a beast.
He is.
He's a beast.
It's exciting to see him grow and do all the things he is. And we've got 3 little girls, ages 6, 4, and 2. And so a couple of them are in school and one's at home. But about a year ago, had the opportunity to jump into this world professionally, take it from a hobby and try to get back to that coaching aspect and pouring into people's lives. And so got my certification, re-upped my certification in personal training through the NSCA, and then got my licensure and accreditation as a sports nutritionist back in May. So over the last year, been doing that, taking on clients, nutrition and personal training, and then coaching classes over at the movement as well. Like you said, just a lot of time or a lot of opportunities where we'll talk and just overlap on training and influences that we've had in either training or business, and just how all of that just overlaps and even outside of that stuff, just with life.
I was actually just talking to somebody today about how, I feel like what I know best in life is training, right? Weightlifting, fitness in general. Like, I spent the better half of 10 years, like, sleeping and breathing that, right? And the business component, I'm still feel like I'm learning a lot, and, other aspects of life, I'm learning a lot. So for me, the way that I learn the best is that I try to draw parallels back to the thing that I know, right? And I think we do that a lot. Like, when we talk, is like, business and fitness have a lot of the same, I think everything in life, there's a lot of the same parallels, right? And things that make you successful in the fitness world or with nutrition are the same things that are going to make you successful in life, right? And with your spouse or in business. And, you know, a lot of people, like, again, myself included, I don't know. I feel like I don't know that much about, you know, business still. But I do know a lot about fitness. And I think if I can figure out, hey, that's a lot like, you know, this aspect of fitness. And then I'll go ask somebody who I feel like does know more about the business side of things than I do. And I'll say, hey, am I right on that? Is that like kind of like this? And when they say, yeah, I'm like, okay, I think I get it now. Right. And so I think, you know, we talk about that a lot, but I just think that would be a big thing that I hope that people maybe come away from with this podcast is that you don't necessarily have to be an expert in every field, but, you know, maybe be able to draw on your own experiences with other things to help you understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I would actually like write in along with that add that you can kind of gauge your level of expertise or competency in something if you can break it down into those actionable steps, whether you're a teacher or a good teacher or not. Like, you might be able to identify something as like, oh, this is good or this is bad or this is helpful or hurtful and point that out. But if you can't break down as to why,
you've just memorized it.
Right. You don't really know the why.
You memorize, you're like, this good, this bad, right? You don't understand the mechanics of it.
Right. You saw an output and you're like, oh, but you don't know why you got that output. And so then just taking that, and I would say, so to take that another a step further is if you can do that in one field,
exactly,
and then parallel it, you can start unpacking the behaviors that it takes to do in the other side. So if I see somebody taking something they've learned in one field and they've been successful in that field and trying to break that down behaviorally in another field, it's like, hey, they're probably really good at what they've done and accomplished because they've done it so well and understand it so well. They're taking like, first principles in that field and trying to apply it in a new field. And so like, I think you're dead on. And I think it just continues to scale up or down.
But what I find interesting about that is I feel like a lot of people, and again, myself included, at one point, it's like, you might follow those principles in one aspect of your life, those first principles, or you might apply them, but then you don't apply them in others. And you're like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, for example, nutrition. Like some people that I know that I feel like understand training very well don't understand nutrition at all, right? Sure. And, you know, or vice versa, right? Like some people that I think understand nutrition super well, but they don't understand training very well. And I know they're two different things, but it does go back to inputs and outputs, which goes back to behaviors. Right. And I think a lot of people, especially in our world of nutrition and fitness, a lot of times the behaviors that drive the outputs or the results, right, are difficult behaviors to master at times, right? So I think a lot of people don't like to put it on themselves that the behavior is what's going to create the change, right?
Yeah. But it's the best part about it. It's like the most daunting feature, but it's absolutely the most beneficial feature about it because then it's something you can control. So it's something you have input on. Like if it wasn't to your behavior, it'd be out of your control and you'd be helpless. But the fact that it, to whatever extent, however much change you can have on something is because of your behavior, that's you. That's empowering.
So let's start giving some value. You're a sports nutritionist, right? That's something that a lot of our athletes could use some help with. What are some like tactical behaviors that you see maybe from youth athletes and even up through college and then again, we can even start talking adult population, but what are some behaviors? Let's start out with like the younger generation, maybe high school, that you see that's maybe they're not doing that could drive a better output.
Yeah. just up front, because we don't want to put out maybe an expectation that, like, yes, there's improvement being left on the table, but that doesn't mean we should be like superly overly critical, especially with where adolescence puts people. And and you're changing and you're trying to figure out the social aspect of life. And so as we talk about this, very very lightly thinking about these approaches or the tactical ways to improve, just because it's something that can be very beneficial or very hurtful when it comes to, hey, how can I improve my young athletes, nutrition or something like that. Just because, again, the self-image or the self-worth is really tied to a lot of this. But getting to that tactical aspect, and it doesn't even have to be about counting calories, but just thinking about how much protein am I actually consuming? Is what I'm consuming an impulse? Is what I'm consuming getting me closer or farther away from what I want?
So what you're doing right now is you're breaking every meal into a decision, and then within that decision, you're having the person or the athlete ask themselves a question prior to consuming.
Yeah.
So essentially the initial behavior is, before you consume something, ask yourself a question about it. It doesn't have to be like just literally every time you be thoughtful.
Just awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like step one.
Yeah. I would say so. And I think I think that applies to almost anyone. Now, maybe you're somebody like, hey, I grew up like my son, like the awareness it's not like thrown in his face every day, but it's just a part of daily life. And so that might not be his first step. And so the next step is, where are you currently? Where are you trying to go?
Right.
So first getting the awareness of just what's in front of me, what am I interacting with? And then that next step is, okay, what pushes me closer? What pulls me farther away? And again, there's so much change happening on in an adolescent body.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to gauge and interpret that feedback properly. And so that's where I wouldn't want any adolescent doing that on their own. And so as they're doing it with a support system, whomever that is.
Right.
Opening that time horizon. Like things get stressful and maybe too overwhelming for like us in our daily life. And we can't think about 6 months down the road or 5 years down the road, and we have to shrink how far out we're looking. I would say that for those who are really going through maybe a difficult time or just in that place of the unknown of how they're doing or what they're doing, like expand the time horizon. Like, I don't know if you could expand it enough for adolescents.
No, I like that a lot. So I'm kind of notorious for, I have like an all in or all out kind of personality. And I have a hard time, like, if I'm really like wired in on my nutrition, sometimes my training actually suffers. So, and that sounds like kind of counter to what all in all out means. But what I mean by that is, like, sometimes I'm so wired in on like essentially eating fewer calories, eating super clean, that like all my mental horsepower and willpower is taken up there, and I don't have the same motivation to go train, right? Vice versa. If I'm training really hard, and luckily these two things actually kind of work out for each other, but when I'm training harder, I'm not maybe usually eating quite as well, just because all my mental horsepower is kind of being taken up there. But what I have found is that, like what you said, making sure I get enough protein, kind of these boulders, maybe these big rocks, the pillars, whatever you want to call them, those things I can always keep in place. It's maybe the finer details that go when I'm focusing more on one thing or the other. Like, even like right now, I would say is a time where I'm training a little bit more, and maybe I'm not watching, exactly what carbohydrate I'm eating at all times, but I still am, I know I'm getting enough protein in every day. Like that's number one. At every meal, it looks somewhat balanced, or I'm cognizant of, for example, maybe the overall amount of carbohydrates or fats that I'm eating in a day, they might just be made up of ice cream sometimes versus always, like
Yeah.
rice and good healthy fats like avocados, right? So, anyways, I just know for myself that I think we have to, for the kids, it seems like they need kind of just these few markers to really hone in on.
Yeah. And then really going with that is two things. And first, you're talking about that kind of the give and take between the two things. And this is something that we've talked about and that I've used in my coaching, and it's helped me personally. It's like I might be not wanting to make that sacrifice, but here's the thing. I know this sacrifice is for the now. I know it's not forever.
Sure.
And so it's like, hey, I'm doing this for a very intentional reason to get a certain goal accomplished. And so it's not bad to have priorities.
Right.
And it's the priority now.
It's like a season.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's like this is the season of, and that's why I know that bulking and cutting kind of gets a bad rep, and I don't think it should be a constant thing. But for me, and I think a lot of people, we might get bored with certain goals. And I think I find it like I have athletes that they just always want to have shredded 6-pack abs year round, right? And you're just like, dude, you got to eat. You're not getting any stronger. But they're so hyper consumed by wanting to look good on the beach that they don't allow themselves to get any stronger. Where if they would just maybe take seasons of literally in the winter, maybe, hey, I don't got to take my shirt off as much, and allow themselves to fuel their body properly and, maybe have 4 abs instead of 6, right? They would get stronger. Then when it comes winter time or summertime, and if they want to, maybe dial things in a little bit more, they can. But for me, I know that I have a hard time sticking to one thing kind of a super, super long time, and that's just what works for me, so.
Yeah. The one, and so going back and I'll kind of tie it back in with the sticking with something, is the way our brain processes information is one piece of information at a time. It's an incapability to multitask.
Right.
And so the thing that can be very helpful to understand, though, and I like to use the example of driving. When you're in high school and you're driving, it's all of that sensory data through your eyes, just you're stressed out, you're white knuckling because you haven't experienced it. But the more you experience it, the more your brain can break up that information into smaller pieces to fit through the funnel quicker.
Right.
So you can become quicker at processing everything you're happening. So if we're talking about building a skill and not being overwhelmed by something that we're trying to accomplish, so going back to the youth athletes and either training or nutrition or whatever it is, volume, doing the thing over and over and over again is going to build that competency, that confidence. So then it essentially turns into a habit, and now you're on autopilot.
Exactly.
Now when you go through, and this goes to your example of, sometimes, or right now, you're more focused on the training and your attention isn't on the nutrition, but in the background on autopilot,
the habits, the
baseline is there to where, is it perfect on point?
Right.
No.
But it's a habit for me to eat protein at every meal, right? For example, it's a habit for me to not consume my calories through beverages, right? That's one thing. For me, I'm not drinking a bunch of regular pop. I'm not, what I'm saying? I'm not
Yeah.
consuming a ton of calories. Like I just have these like kind of almost rules, and those rules don't kind of go out the window when I take the foot off the gas.
Right. Yeah. And so then what really helped me with sticking with something was about a year and a half ago, almost coming up on a year and a half ago, I was about 20 pounds heavier than I am right now.
Wow.
And I was so indecisive with, hey, do I want to cut and lose weight and get lean, but I'm struggling to adhere to it. So maybe I just need to commit to bulking and getting stronger. And it was like every 6 weeks I was flipping back and forth. And so it was like, you know what? I'm having a hard time sticking to anything. So my goal isn't cut or bulk. My goal is consistency. So I'm going to hit maintenance. And I'm not even going to focus on the outcome. I'm going to focus on the process. And through the course of a year at maintenance, I got really good at being consistent. It got really boring. But then I leaned into the monotony and I lost 20 pounds.
So you made the goal goal was the process.
Yeah.
Right, instead of the outcome. That's interesting.
And it wasn't like the goal of losing weight or gaining weight wasn't there. But I took it, and this is something that I'm pulling from a podcast that we both love.
Yeah.
But it's, I used the process as the positive feedback loop. The thing to motivate me to be consistent was the process, not the results that I may or may not have been seeing. And so it was just through the focus on the process, I was able to fuel my motivation to be disciplined without even having to think about losing weight or gaining weight.
That's awesome.
And then again, it was just maintenance for a year. So then I looked back and it was like, oh, wait, without even trying to lose weight, I was just worried about I was just worrying about being consistent.
Right.
And I was consistent. And this was the result.
With your behaviors. Like it's like
Right.
It goes back to behaviors, right? Like I'm gonna be consistent about changing these behaviors. And if I do that, it's
I don't know what's gonna happen.
Right, I don't know.
And that was the best part because it wasn't like I was striving for weight loss. I was just striving for consistency.
So it's almost an experiment. Right? If I do these behaviors, what am I going to get out of it? Right?
And then so what I learned, and okay, so what did I get out of it? Did I lose weight? Yeah. But ultimately, the value, the gold at the end of that I got was the ability to change my behavior when it comes to food. So now, if I want to gain weight, I just push the lever up.
You know how.
I know how. If I want to lose weight, I pull the lever down.
So I love this because I've never thought about it like that. I think it's like what we're doing, the same mechanisms are happening. We're just thinking about them differently, right?
Yeah.
But I think people ask me all the time because, again, it's not like it's easy by any means necessarily, but it's really simple for me to lose weight. Right? We got to talk about the difference between simple and easy, right? Simple is like not complicated. It's just a few variables are changing. That's how I lose weight, right? Easy is like, hey, I really want that ice cream. And it's not easy to say no to it sometimes, right?
Sure.
So anyways, it's not always easy, but like most people that know me know that I can get lean. If I say I'm going to like lean out, I'm going to lean out, right? And it works every time. And it's because I know how to do it. And I've done it for years. And so I get a lot of people that ask me, even kids, should I track macros? Should I track calories? And my answer, and again, I'd love to get your opinion on this, is always like, you should do it at least once. And maybe not as a kid, but I think you should do it for a period of time. And maybe we can get your thoughts on the age in which that's appropriate or whatever. But I think everybody should do it at least for, let's say, a month. I'd love to see them do it for maybe 3 to 6 months, but I think they should do it for a period of time because then it makes them aware of what they're eating. And then, okay, I track these and I'm now aware. Now I know what behaviors I need to make to either, like you said, I know how to gain, I know how to lose. And people ask me if I track, and I don't, but I used to, or I did for a period of time. And so I was aware of what I was consuming. And now I have a pretty rough idea of what I'm consuming, and I'm able to kind of, like you said, pull the lever right back a little bit or push the lever forward. But it's because I went through that period of time where I did kind of pay attention. And it wasn't, I didn't track for very long, but I'm like, okay, I know what I'm consuming now. And at the beginning, I think I was consuming a lot more than I thought I was.
Yeah. And so two things there. The first, you talked about, doing something for a period of time and how long. And you said you didn't do it very long. Just on the way over, I was listening to some people talk, and they were talking about the rate of learning and intelligence. And so it was like, like how long? It's going to depend.
Right.
Like how much time do you need to change behavior?
Right. How long is it going to take you to build the habit, essentially?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it going to take you 5 exposures? So is that 5 breakfasts, or
Right.
is it going to take you 5 months of breakfast?
Right.
And so how long? How's long to take you to learn? And then secondly, going into like, what should the kid do? And again, this is, I tread very carefully here.
Mm-hmm.
And not at all something that it should be, hey, every kid needs to do this. If there's anything that I think is just a broad like blanket there, it's not doing it alone.
Yeah.
Doing it with a parent, doing it with somebody who you see all the time, and I would very strongly suggest somebody who is like a dietitian, somebody who knows nutrition, knows behaviors. And so what do they need? So that's maybe the how, but then the what. I think it's very important to understand what you're consuming, but again, in what lens are you talking about that? Are you talking about that in the terms of achieving performance in a goal in a sport?
Right.
Are you talking about energy levels and enjoyment throughout the day? Or are you talking about that in a lens of losing body fat? Like, I think those are kind of like the first ways to approach it with adolescents. And then from there, it's, okay, hey, maybe a quarter of the plate or a half a plate or a scoop of, and because I think you can use those like units of measurement to gain competency, to know what to do or what not to do without having to get into this many calories or this much. But again, that's going to come from somebody who understands the behaviors, who understands the food science.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super easy to go out there and ask AI or different stuff for information and facts, which can be absolutely accurate. But again, what's the best way to apply that information? And that's where it's going to vary from individual and from kid to kid.
Yeah. No, I think that, when you were talking through that, I was thinking a lot about how, for example, my goals with my nutrition are going to be different than somebody who wants to step up on stage and be a bodybuilder, right? And they're judged on their, aesthetic, look. And same thing with the athletes that we train. Like they might be fueling themselves for performance. And so it's kind of funny though, because I think a lot of people think that, nutrition is should be the same for everybody. Like they demonize foods. We've talked about this, right? They say, well, this is a good food, this is a bad food. And they don't provide any context, right? And I always give the example. I always ask people I feel like when I talk to people, again, I am not a nutritionist. I'm just speaking from experience, right? But I always I try to think of things, and I've worked with some of the top nutritionists, over the years. And anyways, I get these kids and they're, I can't eat any sugar, for example, right? Like a lot of these kids I get are actually, believe it or not, like too skinny, and they don't fuel their body with enough like carbohydrates, especially around exercise times, that kind of thing. And I tell them stories about how, like, when I was competing and training at a high level, I was training like 5 hours a day. I would eat like a row of Oreos every night before I go to bed, and that was like my way of like keeping weight on. And it just, I gotten it from a teammate. He was like, look, if you're gonna train like that, like, I'll just tell you what I do. I eat a row of Oreos so you get like three rows out of it. It's a lot of Oreos, right? A lot of calories. The point was, though, is I would ask the kid, like, and he'd be like, that's so bad for you. And I was like, well, let's say you were stranded on an island and somebody dropped a box of Oreos out of the sky, right? Like, they were like driving over on a helicopter and they just like threw a box of Oreos out, and you haven't eaten anything in 30 days. Are those Oreos bad for you? No, they're probably going to save your life, right? They're going to fuel you. They're going to give you like calories and keep you from, like, and they're probably, honestly, actually, I mean, not probably, they're definitely healthier for you than if somebody dropped a bag of lettuce out of the sky, because you're not getting any calories from that, right?
Sure.
So anyways, now, if you're somebody who's overweight and wants to lose weight, should you be eating a row of Oreos every night? No, you shouldn't. And most 99.9% of people should not be doing that. I just wanted to give an extreme example. I mean, I was training so much. I was burning so many calories that worked for me, and I think everybody needs to take different goals into context and not just be like, this is bad, this is good.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of going with that, like, so maybe the next question then is like, what should the goal be for high school athletes?
Right. That's a good question.
I think the question to ask, or the answer to that question, is competency, gaining an understanding of context. And as a parent of a teenager, as a coach who works with, high school youth, something that I learned early on, or when I was in high school, and I try to pour that into young kids, is like, not peaking in high school is okay. Like, I know going through struggles now, and peer pressure and the judgment, and you're figuring your way out in the world, gaining independence. I know it's stressful and it seems like the end of the world, but it's not. And so, like, again, expanding the time horizon. Like, so you're on the first steps of a very long path. So, like, don't worry about outcomes right now.
Right.
Like, couldn't emphasize that enough. And it's not like we shouldn't worry about performance, but again, we're 30 years old. And so, like, if they're 15, that's only twice as old.
Right.
Not to mention 50 and 60-year-olds. And so, like, there's so much life to perform and to, like, really critique yourself to the level that they're feeling at that moment. But try to work with them, give them feedback. And I don't want to say build confidence, like, falsely, or gloss over things, but make it about, make that feedback, make the boost in confidence about those growth steps that they're taking.
Right.
Like, hey, you're on this trajectory. See, like, who knows what you'll be able to do? And again, just expanding that time horizon, because who knows what's going to happen in 2 years.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're kind of saying is, like, it's more important that they learn the behaviors, and kind of like you said, I know how to gain weight, right? I know how to lose weight. Like, I can pull the lever. It's almost like, at least for me, I feel like they need to learn how to do those things. I don't even care as much that they do those things. Just knowing that they understand the mechanisms, right? Like, I'm okay. Like, for example, at least the way I grew up, I ate I did not eat well as a child. And, back and when I was growing up, nutrition was not as big of a thing as it is now, right? And I actually got into it a little bit in high school. and I can go through that eventually. But basically, I didn't always eat the best, but I knew that, like, even just because I eat something, it's the same thing now. When I eat something now, I know that it's not helping me towards the goal. I'm still doing it anyway sometimes. But the reason that I don't stress out, like, about gaining a little bit of weight from now, time and time again, is because I know the mechanism on how to lose the weight, right? Or how to dial things back in. And so I don't know. It just, with youth athletes, it's not even necessarily for me about them actually always being perfect with their diet and eating all these good foods or bad foods, whatever. It's that they understand that, hey, this is what is causing this. And if someday, if you do want to dial things in, this is what you're going to have to do.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I do that with any of my clients, it's like being comfortable with failure.
Yeah.
You know, kind of the same thing when it comes to being okay with not going all in on a change effort. Like, that was something that I struggled with. You had mentioned like wanting to just be all in and hardcore and committed on something. And sometimes for whatever reason, we're not afforded that, or we feel that today I only got in a 30-minute workout and only got through half of it, so it's a waste. And it's like, no, it's not a waste.
Right.
And so being okay with that and giving it what you can give and dedicating what you can. So the same thing with failure, like, fail. Like, this is something that we preach at home. It's like, even at just a baseline, there's so much more to my role as a parent, but at the very least, having an opportunity to fail and make mistakes and have this safety net to catch you and to pick you back up. And so I think that same kind of principle and philosophy would be something that we could apply to youth athletics or strength and conditioning or any kind of training or coaching that they go through, where, like, go through the failures. Like, that's why it's training. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not in a place where if you don't pay the bills, people are coming to collect your car.
Right.
And so go fail, you know, and build that, encourage the living daylights out of them. And if or when they fail, being there to, again, expand the time horizon for them so they can gain that ability to start picking themselves back up and go after it again. And then, without even realizing it, they'll have learned those things on, oh yeah, that didn't work. This is what helped. And they learn it without even knowing that they've learned it.
Right.
But if we don't give them that environment, and it's always, you failed here, correction and critique, it's like they're feeling that themselves. And so it's like treading super lightly because they're going to be their own worst critic. So yeah, I just going with that. I think when it comes to approaching coaching in general, you know, being that safety net and what we put them through, them being with us as coaches, they're going to push themselves already. And so that growth and that success is going to happen. So how do we handle the other side of that?
I think, you know, one of our goals with training athletes is when they're done training with us someday, that we want them to be able to, now they understand the training process better and they're able to apply it their whole life. Like, if they, you know, in whatever capacity that they want to, they don't just come in and do the workout. Like, we want them to understand the training process and understand. And it's the same. That's what I'm kind of getting at with this is, like, you know, if somebody was to hire you, for example, like, you're not just, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially I would say you're probably not just giving them a plan and saying, yeah, here you go, do this. It's more of like, here's why we're doing this. Here's what this is going to do for you. This is the mechanism in which it's going to do it. And again, once you learn the skill, you have the skill now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, again, you and I, it sounds like we both have the skill of losing weight or gaining weight, right? Or, you know, For me, for example, I knew like heavier days of training, I wanted to eat a little bit differently because I felt a little bit differently when I would eat, certain carbohydrates or certain foods, right? Or, hey, this is all through trial and error, a lot of it, right? But it was like, I didn't want to eat certain things around training time. It didn't make my stomach feel very
Sure.
good, right? So,
Yeah.
but the point is like, once you have the skill, you always have the skill, right? But I don't think a lot of people allow themselves to enough time to learn the skill of certain things, right? Like I think we've talked about in Olympic weightlifting. I always give people the example of I'd rather have you snatch, let's say you were allotted 12 snatches a year, 12 days of snatching a year. I'd rather see you use those 12 days of snatching over like 1 or 2 months or maybe 3 months than over the whole year of once a month, once a month, once a month. And that's because I think every time you go to snatch again, you're going to have essentially lost the skill of snatching and you're kind of starting over and over and over. Where if you just snatch a ton, or let's say shoot a basketball, whatever, it doesn't matter, almost every day for a month, 2 months, 3 months, by the end of that, you're going to be a lot better at whatever that skill is that you just set your mind to. And you could literally not do that thing again for the rest of the year, but you still will have the skill. It's not going to be like when you come back to it, you might be a little bit rusty, but you'll have at least learned a skill. I think too many people, they diet for a week, right? And then they're done with it. And then they get back and they diet for a week and then they're done with it. Right? Instead of like if you've lost a significant amount of weight in your life, like you lost 20 pounds over a year. Now you know how to lose 20 pounds. Right? And at the end of the day, if you ever decide that that's something you want to do again, you now have the skill to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like consistency, it's something that I've not like 8-10 hours a day, but I like stew on, or I think about. And going back to the beginning, and talking about behaviors and how that's, to me, that's an encouraging thing because of what it does. Mm-hmm. It gives us the power to actually have an impact in the world. It's like, how do we do that with consistency? Like, how do I, to steal a term, operationalize?
Right.
How do we operationalize feelings or different things that we go through? And we've heard people talk about operationalizing stress or sadness or anxiety or fun. But to operationalize consistency, and I don't know if I've got it figured out yet, but the idea that I've been playing with is that it's this, like how consistent or inconsistent we are is more about a gap between what we're doing and our expectations. And if it's too great of a gap, then our consistency is going to suffer. And so what does that mean? Well, that might mean we need to lower our expectations of ourselves, or it might mean we just need to get better at what we're doing. And then maybe we are being consistent, but the level of growth is not as optimized as it could be. Also, okay, well, we're consistent, so our ability, our skill set, our thoughts, words, and actions are like on point and they're growing and improving, but maybe our expectations of ourselves aren't growing.
Right.
And so, you can unpack that even farther into, like integrity and the thoughts, words, and actions and how aligned all of those things are, and really just get into the weeds and all that stuff. But if somebody is struggling with something, you might think that the step you're taking is too insignificant, or the expectation you might have on yourself is just too great and it's crushing you, and you're not able to repeat the action for 6 months, even with error.
Right.
And so it's something that I have found as like people can do something right, or they know what to do and they attempt to do it and they do it, but then they stop. And like, well, why? Like, why did you? And it's a thing of like willpower, it seems. And that's how people think about it. But it's like, what is willpower? Is it like some battery pack that you carry around, and the more you fight against the current throughout the day, like it drains that battery.
Right.
That's not something in your control. That's something that's outside of you. And so how do we bring that back to the inside? What are things that we can control that allow us to be more consistent? And so then the way I would work with a client is in listening to them and their day and their behaviors and what they're saying, how they're saying it, both about what they want to have happen in the future, what they would have liked to have happen over the last week. What are they saying? How are they saying it? And what's actually their skill set? Okay, how do we bring those two things closer together? Because there's going to be this sweet spot where you can do what you're wanting to do. And that's where the traction happens. And then all of a sudden you have that reinforcement of seeing something change. It's like, oh, now I can go. Now I'm on the right path. Now I know to chase this down or stay on this path, whether I might have not seen anything. And it's like, am I going the right way?
Right.
And so just my thoughts and kind of ramblings with consistency, because again, it's the volume of action that builds skills. It's the volume of action that leads to huge change. And it doesn't even have to be like big monumentous change, just like little shoveling every single day, and the consistency. So,
well, that's going to volume. I think that's what I meant when I said, like, I'd much rather you like kind of front load all that stuff. It's like you're just doing more volume in less time. And at the end of the day, we know volume is just, if we want to kind of break it, it's just how much work you're doing, how much work you're putting in, right? And in order to build a skill or to build a habit or to build strength, right, muscle fibers, tissue, you have to put in more volume. And at the end of the day, sometimes it's about the volume of decisions good decisions versus the volume of bad decisions that you've put in, right? Or maybe not good or bad, but decisions that go one direction or put you going towards one direction, and volume of decisions that steer you in a different direction, right? And the more the direction you're going to go towards is the one that has more volume being allocated towards it, right? Decision wise, right? So at the end of the day, you don't have to make perfect financial decisions in your life. Not every decision has to be a quote unquote good financial decision, but if you make more good financial decisions than poor ones, then you'll have more money, right?
And taking that a step further and kind of going a little bit more up macro is, I don't think you're going to know what is good or bad, or what pushes you closer or pulls you farther away, if you haven't done it enough. You won't have the feedback to know, oh, this got me closer, unless you've done it a lot.
So basically, like, that thing that if you're wondering why something's not working, and this kind of goes back to things that we've already chatted about, maybe just do more of the thing you're doing and see if that does the trick, right? So like if you're training and you're like, dude, I'm not getting stronger, just try doing exactly what you're doing right now, but just do more of it. See if that works, right? Rather than trying something new. Right. And I think that's what it kind of always goes back to, is it's always like what they call it, the girl in the red dress, right? Where what's the new thing? Oh, this doesn't work. I got to try something new. Well, and then you go and you realize that girl, that training program, that diet,
right,
they all have the same problems. It always has the same, you always hit the same wall, you always hit the same kind of barrier that you have to break through, right? And so instead of this isn't the right one, this isn't the right behavior, just do more of the behavior, right? So for example, I get a lot of kids, I'm like, you got to eat more food. Like, you just got to eat more, dude. You got to eat. Like, I mean, we're talking like high level athletes going to play D1 sports, and they just don't weigh enough. They're just, they need to pack on some muscle if they're going to go play at that level. And I hear it every single time. Dude, I eat so much. I eat so much food. And I'm like, here's the thing. I don't not necessarily not believe that you do, but what you think is so much, I don't care. You got to eat more than that, right? Like it's what you, trust me, if you eat more than what you're currently eating, you will gain weight, right? I mean, I'm dumbing things down, obviously, but the point is like, you just need to do more of the behavior. So you're like, I eat so much. Cool. Sure you do. Eat more. See if that works. Right. But again, man, this is really getting into the weeds of things, but basically like people do the same thing with like weight loss. They're like, man, I eat so healthy. I am not losing any weight. Well, try to eat healthier. Right? Like I know that sounds dumb and you're the guy to kind of tell somebody what that means. But it's always like an excuse of like, I'm already doing the behavior. It's like, okay, we'll do it more. Do that behavior more, or do it at a higher level. Right?
Yeah. And this is I think one of the other things that has driven me to create a business model the way I have with the coaching, and really specifically on the nutrition side, because that chapter of going into new things like that and looking for that feedback, it's been coined the lonely chapter. So it can get hard,
right?
Because you're looking for the feedback of doing the right thing, and you haven't done it enough to know, and so you're literally on your own, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And so you don't know what's up, you don't know what's down. And so that's why, again, I've even from the name of the company that my wife and I started, why we have created it, and the way I coach. Can
you go through that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So the company we created, Triple E Health, and why Triple E Health, the 3 E's are exercise, educate, and elevate, and in that specific order. And this gets into it because we can learn and have the knowledge in our head, but if we don't do, we're not going to know if that plan on paper, one, is feasible, one, is applicable, repeatable. And so through doing, we actually learn. And then we've learned, okay, now we can make change. Now we can not just achieve a goal, but learn why the goal was achieved and translate that to other areas of our life, other iterations of the same aspect. Like 10 years down the road, I've learned this skill. Yep. I know how to manage this aspect of my life, even though I live in a different city, even though I now have 4 kids. And so it very particular order, because that's human behavior. That's humans. But it's again going back to it, that chapter. It's like we don't know. And so what can I do as a coach to, one, not do the work for you, but 2, be that little sound, maybe be the little thing on your shoulder that doesn't give you the answer, but highlights, hey, this is something to pay attention to. Or be that reflection in the mirror to hold up the growth that you have seen, to expand that time horizon. So it's not just you criticizing yourself and not seeing the growth that you've made on that, 2 months in of a year-long journey. Then you're like, I'm not getting anywhere. It's like, well, hold on, let's take a second and look. And then it's like, oh yeah. And so then give you some of that positive reinforcement to keep it going, because so early on in something new, you don't know. And again, that goes back to that consistency. And so if I can lower barriers for you to gain traction, lower barriers of entry to get into that new thing, it's only going to increase the chances of you sticking with it, which is where success in a long-term goal comes from, but then also long-term to where you're not losing 10 pounds and then in 5 years you've gained 15,
Right.
and then you've got to re-lose it and start from zero. It's like, sure, you're going to go through seasons,
Yep.
and different things are going to happen in life where you do good in one area or you do not so well, but again, you'll have gained that skill set.
That's where the education comes from. It's like, you
Right.
got to educate first, because I need you to understand how you do this. Because again, you're going to go through times in your life and where it's not, you're going to revert, right? Like, you're in anything in life, you need to understand the mechanisms, not just memorize and,
And sometimes the highlighting of the education or the teaching the subject matter isn't like the full scientific breakdown.
Right.
Or sometimes it's not even until after the fact. And like, well, what's after the fact? I would say after the light bulb has gone off for that client.
Right.
Sometimes I'll know, and I'm watching them go through this, and then this light bulb goes off in their head. It's like, yeah, that's what this is. And it's like, oh yeah. And it's like, you've got it mastered, or you're competent there.
It's kind of, it's weightlifting, right? Like, you like to ask a lot of questions when we work on weightlifting and stuff, but like, we've talked about this, how some of my top athletes, I'm not necessarily giving them all the whys.
Right.
I would give that to them afterwards, though. Like, once they've kind of figured it out, it's like, hey, like, this is like, you're doing this well, but I don't want them overthinking it a lot, right?
And so that's where it's gonna vary from person to person. But again, what does that person need? How much action can a person complete or accomplish or invest into an endeavor without needing that reinforcement? And if they can just keep doing without being gratified, and they can just put in the work, it's like, you're going to achieve.
I think that's at the end of the day why you need a coach like you, somebody that you're working with, somebody to hold you accountable, somebody to talk to, right? Somebody to go through the process with you at the beginning is, because we want you to, one, create the right mindset towards the behaviors, right? Like you're talking about, we want to build confidence through this, right? We want to do all those things. So anyways, I just think when somebody's first learning this stuff, it's so beneficial, and it really speeds up. Like, I feel like I taught myself a decent amount of things and through watching videos or whatever. But anytime I've ever wanted to learn something quickly and maybe more accurately, I've paid somebody to teach me.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like we've talked about, like I've hired business consultants and, weightlifting coaches or whoever else, right? And every time I've done that, I've learned the thing way quicker, and I've also not developed as many bad habits along. Like, you can learn through trial and error, right? And there's parts of that that come with it, but I think you kind of are paying somebody that's gone through all those experiences and dealt with a lot of clients who have gone through different experiences and learned how to, like, for example, I've had weightlifting clients that have every error that I've ever seen, right? Like, there's a lot, and I've had to learn how to, deal with their errors in their form, and also different attitudes and different mindsets and different, and I've had to learn how to, I'm still learning as far as that goes. But the point is I feel like it would be really beneficial for somebody to get some guidance on this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And going with that, it might be for like a single skill, like a gymnastics movement or an Olympic weightlifting movement. And obviously, like, the hat of technique is like a magical purse or a magical hat that doesn't have a bottom. But it's like, hey, it doesn't have to be an open-ended time.
Right.
Like, there can be like, hey, 3 months.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's, it doesn't have to feel helpless. Like, there's no end in sight. There's no achievement. It's always just going to be the striving for better. But yeah, and here's the other thing, and you had talked about this, like, we're not just doing this to affect that one person, but like because it's going to spread out. And so when it comes to valuing education, it's like that's what I put into it too, because I'm not just learning this and helping myself make less mistakes and learn faster,
Right.
but that also turns around and allows me to positively impact others quicker. That allows me to reach more people, because hopefully through those that I'm working with, especially the parents or those who have families, it's like now you're going to be taking that to your kids. Now you're going to be taking that to your family. And then it's just like a ripple. It just gets bigger. And as encouraging as that is, it's also like the weight of it. Yep. Like, hey, don't screw up. Exactly. You know, because the responsibilities are, you're not just affecting this one person you're talking to.
Right.
And so then it really comes down to making sure I'm doing things right and being who I want to be. And that kind of makes me think about, in a way that I've done that for myself is I took a picture of myself and then I put it through some software program or something, and it aged me. And so now I've got this picture of myself like old and gray and beard and everything. And it's like, what do I want that person to be?
Right.
And what I'm doing today, getting me closer to who I want that 80-year-old Nick to be. And if not, have I made progress? Like, okay, I'm not, but have I made progress over the last 6 months to where I am closer? Okay, that's good. I'm making progress. Let's find a way to take that next step. But yeah, a way to kind of be my own coach, or to be that reflection in the mirror, not just with who I am today, but that older me looking back at me and have that conversation with my future self.
Awesome, man. Well, if anybody wants to find out more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
My website, 333 Health, spelled triple, the number 3 health.com. And then Facebook, Nick Trout here in the Quad Cities, or Triple E Health.
Yep.
And then Facebook or Instagram is Nick.Trout.
And if they want to work with you, shoot you DM, email.
Yeah, Messenger on Facebook or Instagram. And then also there's a form on our services page on the website to reach out and get in contact. So.
Awesome. I've got like a lot of things I want to talk about, but I don't.
No, we could go.
We're going to do this
That's
again.
good.
All right. So thanks for listening, guys. I hope you got a lot out of this. Really fun talking to Nick, and I think that we're probably going to do this again pretty soon. So take care.